What's up, guys? Welcome to the video. My channel name is College Football Frenzy, back here with another video, and today I'm going to be doing my conference realignment proposal video. Now, conference realignment in college football is probably one of the most interesting college football topics. Unlike other sports or other American sports where there seems to be two conferences in every league, in college football, the amount of conferences and which teams are in each conference, it seems like it's always changing. It's very controversial. We currently have 10 conferences. We've seen less than that. We've seen more than that. But it seems like the conferences and the teams in them are always changing. It's a very exciting topic to talk about. A lot of it has to do with, obviously, TV deals, money, where a school is geographically, that definitely is important, and also, historically, which conferences they've been in. So it's a very interesting topic to talk about which schools are going to be moving conferences in the next conference realignment. Now, in a few years, I think some TV deals will be up, and that will start to probably trigger some conference realignment and teams moving from one conference to another. Every 5-10 years, this happens. The TV deals are up. A school will move to another conference. The recent big conference realignment happened around, I think it was a little bit less than 10 years ago, with, the Big East getting, kind of dismantled, and it kind of turned into the American Athletic Conference, and teams like, Pittsburgh, West Virginia moving to different conferences, and also like a few Mountain West schools moving out of that conference. There was a lot of changes going on. The Big 12 obviously lost Missouri not too long ago in Nebraska. So a lot has happened throughout the history of conference realignment. There's been a lot of different conferences, but I decided I would make my new conference realignment proposal. Now, in an ideal world for me, I think there's still 10 conferences. Every conference, though, for me, I think almost every conference at least should have 12 teams, no less. I don't think there should be any conference with less than 12 teams. There's currently, I believe, 3 conferences with less than 12 teams. I feel like that just makes the conferences uneven. So I think in an ideal world, every conference has at least 12 teams, maybe a couple with 14, but relatively the same amount of teams in each conference. I also have every conference having the same amount of in-conference games. I'm sorry, Greg Sankey, you can go cry about it, but I think it should be 9 conference games for every single conference. I don't want to see the ACC and the SEC playing Wofford when the Big Ten late in the season or the Pac12 is playing in-conference games. I just don't want to see that. So I think that definitely the 8 conference games needs to stop. I think it needs to be 9 in-conference games. And I think overall the scheduling needs to be a little bit more uniform. Like each team has to, I think, play one or two, or each Power 5 team has to at least play 1 or 2 other Power 5 teams a year. It can't be different. It's just confusing. The scheduling doesn't make any sense. So in the ideal world, most conferences have 12 teams. There's still 10 conferences, 9 conference games per year for every team, about the same amount of Power 5 out-of-conference games, and also any conference with 12 teams, I think, should eliminate divisions. I don't like divisions. Sometimes it's good for tiebreakers, but overall in the playoff picture, it's caused a lot of controversy. Cough, cough. 2016 Ohio State, Penn State. 2017 Alabama, Ohio State. It's very controversial. So I decided that I would try to get rid of divisions in most conferences. I tried what I could. Now, of course, like I said, money has a big deal to do with it. I would love for the conference realignment to be perfect, but unfortunately, believe it or not, athletic directors and commissioners care a little bit more about money than just the fans' interest. The fans' interest is important, but money is what matters most. I think we all know that. So that's very important. And of course, like I said, geographically, that's why I did it. That's where I made a lot of the changes geographic-wise. And then also historically, if a team has a very good history with a certain conference, I think if they're in a conference that they don't fit in correctly, even if they're in a good place geographically wise, I feel like they have the right to move back to the conference that they were with, that they fit good historically. But without further ado, let's get into this conference realignment. So with the Pac-12 Conference, as you can see, not too many changes. The Pac-12 is one of the easiest ones to do because it's mostly just out west teams, and every team, I think, is in a good place money-wise, geographically-wise. Every team, I think, in the Pac-12 is in a good position right now to stay in the conference. That being said, I do feel like Colorado is that one school that traditionally doesn't fit well with the Pac-12. It had like 1 or 2 good seasons in the Pac-12, but still relatively new to the Pac-12. It's not a very old Pac-12 school. It was with the Big 12 for quite a while. I think they won a championship in the Big 12, and overall they definitely fit better in the Big 12 in my opinion. So I didn't like them in the Pac-12. I didn't think this conference was right for them. It was good geographically wise, but not good traditionally wise. So I took Colorado out of the Pac-12, and I added Boise State. Boise State's been trying to get extra competition for a while now. Obviously, they moved from the WAC, which was clearly a weak conference at the time, to the Mountain West, because the Mountain West had BYU, it had Utah, it had all these good teams, it had TCU, and then, of course, all those 3 teams left the Mountain West, and then once again, Boise State found itself playing weak competition, and that was not the goal. It even tried to move to the Big East, but then the Big East obviously dismantled, so the Boise State has been looking to play in a good conference for a long time. Geographically wise, this will fit. They definitely can compete with the Pac-12 teams. We've seen that. So I think they're a very good fit for the Pac-12. And like I said, 9 in-conference games. It's a 12-team conference overall. I think the round-robin schedule, it should be just a pod system or something like that. Obviously, you still have to play your rivals the last week of the season, but they have to figure out some pod system for this overall. They definitely could do it. I mean, you're only not playing 2 teams inside your conference. It's still a 12-team conference, and it's still probably pretty easy. But this is my 12 teams, no North, no South. But I think it works pretty well overall in this conference. Not much change. Now, the SEC, I think the SEC really doesn't need to add any more teams. I think really just needs to lose teams. I think there are some members that will never leave, like Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Florida, Vandy, Tennessee, all those teams. I don't think they're ever going to leave LSU. So those teams, I think, are obviously going to stay forever. There are a few options that I had besides the 2 that I have leaving, which are South Carolina and Missouri to leave. I thought about having Texas A&M leave to the Big 12, but Texas A&M I think actually likes being in the SEC, and money-wise, they're pretty good. It also connects the SEC to Texas, and I think they like that, so I don't think Texas A&M will leave. The other option was possibly Arkansas, but Arkansas overall I think needs to stay in the SEC right now. I don't think the Big 12 wants them that much. They're not a fantastic fit in the SEC, but still overall I think they're better in this conference than they are in the Big 12. So yeah, those are the 12 teams, and for South Carolina and Missouri, I don't think they fit very well. Geographically wise, they're in an okay position, but it's not like you don't need to have them in the SEC. They're barely in the Southeast. So I didn't think those 2 teams need to stay. Historically wise, they don't really fit very well in the SEC, and they're rivals. They're really main rivals. I'm sorry to say this to the SEC, but Missouri, their really main rival at heart is Kansas. Arkansas, it's a cool rivalry, but it's not nearly as good as Kansas and Missouri. I think they need to go back to that. And South Carolina, their main rival is clearly Clemson, just a much better fit in a different conference. So these are my 12 teams in the SEC. I still think it's a very strong conference with a lot of good teams. But like Missouri, I don't think any other SEC team really cares about them. And South Carolina, I think, would be a much better fit, playing a lot of their rivals in a different conference. So I took those 2 teams out, and no teams join. All right, the Big Ten. A lot of change going on here. So, of course, some of the blue bloods stay, like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. They're all staying. Wisconsin, they're staying. The 3 that are leaving, Nebraska, Rutgers, and Maryland, these are the 3 newest teams to the Big Ten, obviously. Geographically wise, they're not a terrible fit. They're actually a pretty good fit. Traditionally wise, they are not a good fit whatsoever, in my opinion. Maryland, Nebraska, and Rutgers are 3 of the probably biggest losers in conference realignment. they really should never have moved conferences. Maryland was great in the ACC. Rutgers was good in the Big East. Of course, that dismantled, but there's another conference I think that will be better for them. And Nebraska was great in the Big 12. They cut off their pipeline to a lot of the states like Texas and Oklahoma by leaving the Big 12, and they just fit very well in that conference. They had a lot of success. Now, the big change. Notre Dame. I understand what you're going to say. Notre Dame is a better fit for the ACC. Well, first off, geographically wise, clearly Notre Dame is actually a better fit for the Big Ten. That's no doubt there. Second off, I feel like the rivalries overall are better in the Big Ten than they are in the ACC. I mean, you look at this. Michigan, that was a big rivalry back then. You have Indiana, which was a big rivalry. You have Purdue, which was a rivalry at one point. And, of course, you have Michigan State. That was also a big rivalry at one point. So I think Notre Dame going to the Big Ten not only will be better geographically wise, but also be better for rivalries and competition. It'll be fun. And there's definitely a potential to have a good rivalry with Ohio State or with Wisconsin or with Penn State. So I think this will be a pretty good fit for Notre Dame competition-wise and where they're located. I understand the ACC is probably where Notre Dame's heading right now with who they're playing each year. I think they have to play at least 5 ACC teams per year. I understand they're in the ACC for all of their sports besides hockey and football. I get that. But overall, Notre Dame just is really, in my opinion, a better fit for the Big Ten. They probably will go the ACC. If that's the case, I could always leave Maryland in here and have Notre Dame go in the ACC. But I decided that Notre Dame overall would be a good fit for this conference. I think it would be fun to see them in here. So I put Notre Dame in here, and you can argue all you want. I understand with the TV contract and stuff, it probably could go a different way. But I like Notre Dame in the Big Ten. All right, the Big 12. This was probably my favorite to do overall. I have 3 teams joining and 1 leaving. So first off, leaving. West Virginia absolutely made no sense in the Big 12 whatsoever. Both geographically, it makes no sense. Historically, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. They were playing teams around the Northeast and maybe the Midwest, but just the Big 12 absolutely makes no sense. They should not be playing teams in Texas and Oklahoma every other week. It just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for them to be in the Big 12. I just don't understand it. I think it was a stupid move by West Virginia. And 3 teams joining. Of course, these are 3 teams that have been in the Big 12 and really had more success in the Big 12 than the conferences that they're currently in. Nebraska, of course I want them in the Big 12. They had so much success in this conference, and I think they'll get some more success if they come back to the Big 12. Colorado, they had more success in the Big 12. Have them come back. In Missouri, I want to see that rivalry again, Missouri and Kansas. Even if they both are not very good every year, I want to see the rivalry happen again. So I add Missouri in here. And geographically wise, Missouri's not that bad for the Big 12. So this is my 12-team Big 12. The couple Oklahoma teams and the Texas teams, they're staying. I think overall, though, you have some great rivalries. I mean, Oklahoma versus Nebraska again. Oh, my God, that would be absolutely incredible to see Oklahoma and Nebraska play each other again. I think there would be a great rivalry potential in here. The one concern, obviously, or the one thing that the one team I didn't put in that I could have put in was definitely Texas A&M. It would have been great to see Texas A&M and Texas play each other again, but like I said, I think Texas A&M likes being in the SEC more. Money-wise, I think it's better for them, and it connects the SEC to Texas. So I think Texas A&M actually wants to stay in the SEC, so I don't think Texas A&M is coming back. So that's just my opinion on it. That was a great rivalry, but I don't think it will happen. But this is my new Big 12. I think it's a lot better. Alright, so to the ACC. So like I said, there's always a chance that Notre Dame could join the ACC, and I would have Maryland stay back in the Big Ten if that was the case. That could happen with Maryland staying back in the Big Ten and Notre Dame joining the ACC. That's definitely a possibility. But I decided that my new ACC would have Maryland and South Carolina joining, 2 teams that already have been in the ACC, 2 teams that had pretty good rivalries in the ACC, 2 teams that, I feel like have had pretty good success in other sports in the ACC. So I think these 2 teams are a better fit overall for the ACC. It might hurt a little bit money-wise, especially for South Carolina. But overall, geography-wise, yes, South Carolina's in the Southeast, but they're overall a better fit for the ACC. And also, I feel like historically wise, it's better. And of course, you got a big rivalry with Clemson. Another one of your rivals is North Carolina, obviously, and you can create a rivalry with North Carolina State or Duke. So there's a lot of rivalry potential there, so I think South Carolina was a good fit. And again, like I said, Maryland's fairly new to the Big Ten, but they've had a lot of historical success in other sports in the ACC, especially basketball. So I think they should stay I think they should come back to the ACC. Now, leaving. 4 teams are leaving, so the ACC will be a 12-team conference overall, like all the other Power 5 conferences are. I have Pitt leaving, I have Boston College leaving, I have Syracuse leaving, and I have Louisville leaving. If you notice, these are all teams that are fairly new to the ACC. They're in the ACC right now. They're all fairly new. A lot of these teams were in the Big East. I think actually every team was in the Big East at one point. Many of these teams only joined about 10 years ago, so they're pretty new overall to this conference, and I don't think it's a great fit for them. Geography-wise, yes, a lot of them are like on the East Coast, but the ACC, I think, is more a conference for Southern teams or teams that are on the middle of the East Coast. I don't think it's a conference for teams that are in like the northeastern United States, besides Maryland, but that's like right next to Virginia. So I think the ACC is more like a conference that's for teams on the coast of the Southeast or the middle part of the East Coast. I don't think it's supposed to be a conference for like New England teams like Boston College or, you know, metro teams like Syracuse or Pitt. So I think those 4 teams need to leave. Overall, historically, they're not a great fit for the conference either. They all leave. I will say it's going to hurt the ACC in basketball and some other sports. We're going to have to figure that out. They're going to have to probably make a deal with the ACC or something like that. Maybe they can find a way to stay in the ACC for a few sports. Usually that doesn't happen, but maybe they can figure something out. It's definitely going to be a major blow to the ACC basketball-wise, especially considering the ACC really is a basketball conference. But still, you always have the option if you're Syracuse or Louisville, if you want to continue playing a very good conference for basketball, you always have the option to maybe work something out with maybe the Big East in basketball, see if you can get back into there. Which leads me to talking about my next conference, which is the American Athletic. This is the conference that Louisville, Syracuse, Rutgers, West Virginia, Pitt, and Boston College are joining. So like I said, those 4 teams are just talking about. They're joining this one. My guess would be Syracuse, Louisville, and probably maybe even Boston College wouldn't want to play basketball or some other sports in the American Athletic Conference because it's a little bit weaker overall. My guess would be they would want to go to the Big East in basketball, and again, you would have to work something out there. But I think maybe a team like Rutgers or maybe West Virginia wouldn't have a huge problem with staying in the American Athletic for basketball or other sports like that. Now, this conference, as you can see, would be a lot stronger than it is now. It's the strongest Group of 5 conference currently, and it would be by far the strongest Group of 5 conference with this change. I have probably the 3 teams that don't fit well in the American Athletic leaving. Tulane, I understand, they used to be in the SEC, now the American Athletic, but I have them leaving the American Athletic, going to an even worse conference. Tulsa, I don't think is a great fit. And Eastern Carolina University, most college football fans probably don't even know they're in the American Athletic Conference, to be honest. The first time I heard of that school, I thought, oh, it must be like a Sun Belt school, but no, or it's an American Athletic school. I don't think they're a great fit. So I have those 3 schools leaving. Of course, all the good American Athletic teams like Memphis, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston's pretty good in basketball. SMU is getting a little bit better. They're staying. Navy's staying. But look at this 14 teams. I think in football, this would be a very strong conference. Again, it's 14 teams. All the Power 5 conferences, I have 12 teams. In this conference, I would accept having divisions. This is the exception to no divisions. I think in this conference, you would be allowed to have divisions. The divisions would be the North and the South. It's currently the East and the West. I like the North and the South better. You have Boston College, West Virginia, Temple, Rutgers, Syracuse, Pitt, and Navy in the North. And in the South, you have Memphis, USF, UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, SMU, and Louisville. Now, besides historically wise, or geography wise, it being a good fit, it's also a great fit for rivalries. Cincinnati and Louisville, that kind of was a rivalry. They're really close to each other. That has a lot of potential to take off. UCF and USF, that rivalry is still there. Houston, SMU, that can be a good rivalry. Boston College and Syracuse, a lot of potential there. And, of course, my favorite of all the American athletic rivalries, the Backyard Brawl is back. I have West Virginia playing Pitt every year. That would be great to see that rivalry back. I think the Backyard Brawl would be a fun rivalry. So that is back. But overall, it's kind of like a new Big East. It's just the American Athletic. That's what it's called. But it's very similar to how the old Big East was. But it's the American Athletic Conference. It's almost identically similar. Just a few changes overall. But I think this would be a pretty strong conference. You can consider it as a Group of 5 conference, or you can just consider it as a Power 6. You can do a Power 6 in a Group of 4. That could be a possibility. And this is like the 6 power conference. Because overall, this would be a pretty strong conference. I do have a situation. I understand that some schools, like maybe Syracuse and Boston College, might not want to drop to the Group of 5, but I have a fix for that. I'm going to be explaining my playoff proposal later, how to expand the college football playoff. And in that proposal, it would make getting to the college football playoff for a Group of 5 teams easier. So if this is considered a Group of 5 conference, if it is assembled, it would still be pretty easy for these teams if they were to go undefeated to get into the playoffs. So it really wouldn't ruin the hopes of Syracuse or Boston College making it to the playoffs. So I have a scenario where it doesn't matter that this is a Group of 5 conference anyway if a team goes undefeated. But overall, again, very strong conference, a lot of rivalry potential. I really like this overall. And again, I think for the other sports, the American Athletic would probably have to allow half of these teams to go to either the Big East or the ACC in other sports like basketball, because I don't think Syracuse is going to want to be playing, or Louisville is going to want playing their basketball in the American Athletic. My guess would be the Big East. So you might have to allow a few teams to go to the Big East in a different sport. But then again, you already have Wichita State in the American Athletic for basketball, which doesn't play in football. So you still have a lot of good basketball teams. But you probably would have to allow half of these schools that are joining to play probably basketball in another conference. All right, so overall, that's my main conference realignment proposal. There are a few other changes. I think the Sun Belt should add Tulane and Eastern Carolina University. Overall, those two schools, I'm sure, would be willing to move to the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt currently has 10 teams. It's a small conference. It needs more teams, and those two teams are a good fit geographically wise. There's a couple teams, I think, in the Sun Belt from the Louisiana area, and Tulane's in Louisiana, so that definitely helps. And Eastern Carolina could fit in well as well. So the Sun Belt will be a 12-team conference. Again, every 12-team conference I have has no divisions at all, and every conference I do have, no matter whether it's 12 or 14 teams, of course, like I said, has 9 in-conference games no matter what. There is one other 14-team conference besides the Sun Belt, and that is the Conference USA. I think the Conference USA shouldn't change whatsoever. I think it's good as now. So that will have divisions. That's the only other conference besides the American Athletic Conference that will have divisions. It's the only other conference that will have 14 teams. Every other conference in college football has 12 teams with no divisions. Now, the MAC, 12 teams, like I said. Obviously, no divisions. That's not changing at all. I think geographically wise, everybody's in a good spot right now. So I don't think that should change whatsoever. So the MAC stays the same. Conference USA stays the same. And the Sun Belt, again, adding Tulane and adding Eastern Carolina University. The hard thing was, I feel like, the Mountain West. Now, the Mountain West is obviously, like I said, losing Boise State. That's a big loss. Adding which team they're going to add is the key. It's interesting to see. Now, they could go on and add 3 teams and make it a 14-team conference, although I don't think they're going to do that. But it's a possibility that they go to a 14-team conference. In that case, there would be 3 14-team conferences in college football. Or they just add 1 team. Now, I think the candidates to join the Mountain West are New Mexico State, Tulsa, who I had leaving the American Athletic, Or maybe BYU. Maybe BYU makes a return to the Mountain West. I think the Mountain West right now, it's a decent conference, but losing Boise State would hurt a lot. So it would definitely be a weaker conference. And, there's definitely a few options that could go into the Mountain West. My best guess would be either I would probably say New Mexico State because it's in the best place geographically wise. But also, Tulsa could be in it. Or maybe BYU. Maybe BYU decides that being independent isn't the right move. There's a lot of different options. But overall, those would be the three teams that I think could join the Mountain West. And again, it could be a 12-team conference. It could be a 14-team conference. Now, overall, that's my conference realignment. I just think it would work having most of your conferences, especially all of your Power 5 conferences, being 12-team conferences, each with nine in-conference games. You're going to play almost everybody in your conference every single year, and if you don't play that team, you could very well face them in the conference championship game anyway, so it shouldn't cause that much controversy. It should be much easier to find the playoff teams that you're looking for, rather than having, oh, this team's 11-1, but they didn't win their conference, and this team's 11-2 in the same conference. They beat this 11-1 team and won their conference championship, but they lost to this team who this 11-1 team beat. Stuff like that. Obviously, like I said, I'm talking about Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. That was a big controversy, and, that would have been solved if we had this scenario. So that's how I like the conferences. And again, I'm sure I'm going to have some comments saying, oh, you can't do this because of this rivalry. Oh, you can't do this because of this and that and that. I understand. There's probably a reason why each school should stay or join a different conference. I completely agree. There's so many different things that go into it. But then again, when West Virginia was in the Big East, my guess would be not many people would think that they would eventually one day find themselves in the Big 12, facing teams from Oklahoma and Texas every other week. So, anything can happen in here. And that's overall my conference realignment. Again, if you're in the group of 5, my playoff proposal is going to make it easier for you to get to the college football playoff. So never fear UCF or USF. I understand those two teams I've probably been thinking about maybe making the jump to the Power 5, maybe the ACC, but I don't think they will need to under my new conference realignment proposal. But yeah, guys, overall, that's it for now. Thank you for joining in. Leave your proposal predictions down below.